Hello and welcome to the new series of Drishti IAS. I am Pooja Divedi. So today we have the topic Delimitation Commission of Jammu and Kashmir. The assembly seats have been redrawn, which will have implications over parliamentary seats of Jammu and Kashmir as well. So what is the entire issue? It has been controversial. It has been going since a long period of time. As bureaucrats, if you ever get placed into the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, you need to know that what is actually going on. So all this is important from the perspective of prelims as well as mains, specifically GS mains paper 2. Okay, so let's begin with the news. The news is pretty evident from the heading itself that the Jammu and Kashmir Delimitation Commission has come out with its final order, and that is being taken as something that will have wide-ranging implications over the next few years for the demography of Jammu and Kashmir. And of course, our neighbor, that is Pakistan, is not happy with this particular report. It has shunned the Indian government and also said that Reorganization Act is also not into the favor of Jammu and Kashmir. So this is all that we are going to cover. Before that, let's talk about Delimitation Commission. What is it? Because I will try to make it as brief as possible. Whatever gaps have been left out, you have to do it as your homework. You have to plug those gaps. Okay. So delimitation basically is an act or a process to fix limits in order to make it a territorial constituency. It could be done in a country or a state from the perspective of elections. And for India, it has been constituted 4 times. This can be a prelims question. In India, the Delimitation Commission has up till now formed only for 3 times. No, it's 4 times. Remember that. When you have to see that you have to be careful with the years as well. So they have a particular act for every year whenever they have to form the commission. 1952 under Delimitation Commission Act of 1952. For 63 it was the Act of 62. For 73 again 72, and 2002 under Delimitation Act of 2002. Factual information, remember it. Moving on. Also one thing to be kept in mind over here is that its order have the force of law. Okay. They have the force of law, and the biggest takeaway from this particular segment is with respect to Delimitation Commission is that its orders cannot be called in question before any court. This can also be a misleading prelims question if they ask you their orders are under the jurisdiction of Supreme Court in India. It's not so. And the date from which the delimitation order has to be enforced, it has to be done by the president. The date has to be specified by the president. Prelims fact. Okay. The copies of its orders are laid before the houses of the parliament and the state legislative assembly concerned. Okay. And there cannot be any sort of modification that can be done by the legislative assembly or the member of House of the People. So keep this also in mind. No modifications is permissible because this is a really powerful body. Delimitation Commission is a hugely powerful body. Moving on, if we talk about the background with respect to Jammu and Kashmir, what was the need to do any sort of delimitation exercise there? First of all, it goes back to the Reorganization Act. The Reorganization Act, the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act, it increased the number of seats in the assembly, and in August 2020, the Independence Day speech of the Prime Minister said that we are going to have a delimitation exercise in Jammu and Kashmir so that democratic nature of Jammu and Kashmir can be rebuilt, assembly elections can take place. And in June 2021, the centre invited approximately 14 key political parties, which was highly covered by the media channels, 14 key political leaders from Jammu and Kashmir to talk about what are the stakes with respect to this delimitation exercise. You see, before this, 111 seats were there, 46 in Kashmir when it was a state, and 37 in Jammu and 4 in Ladakh, plus 24 seats were reserved for Pakistan illegally occupied Kashmir. So that is why we needed this delimitation exercise, because when the Reorganization Act came into being, the seats were increased. So because of that, we needed a proper delimitation exercise. Okay, moving on. If we talk about the erstwhile, what was the erstwhile arrangement with respect to the seats in the parliament as well as the state legislation assembly? See, delimitation of parliamentary constituencies were done according to the Constitution of India. Okay, and assembly seats Okay, assembly seats, that is the Jammu and Kashmir assembly seats, were done under the Jammu and Kashmir Representation of People's Act of 1957. Remember that. Okay, so for parliament it was by the Constitution of India, but for the state assembly election it was done by this particular act. Okay, and delimitation, it's not like delimitation has never been done there. Of course it has been done there in 63, 73 and 1995. And the last delimitation was exercise was done under Justice K.K. Gupta Commission. And the delimitation exercise, the population of that was taken for reference for delimitation exercise was done according to the 1981 census. Okay, and it formed the basis of the state election in which year? 1996. And after the 2001 census, as the Jammu and Kashmir passed the law putting a freeze on fresh delimitation of seats until 2026. Remember that. So this is one of the reasons that delimitation exercise right now, what has been done yet right now with respect to new delimitation commission, that has been controversial. Okay, so also we have to keep in mind that the delimitation commission, the present one, which was set up on March 6, 2020, has come up with its final orders, and the delimitation commission was headed by, remember this name, retired Supreme Court Justice Ranjana Prakash Desai. Okay, so remember, very important person, remember the name. Okay, moving on, if we talk about the Chief Election Commissioner and the Jammu Kashmir's Chief Electoral Officers, they also played a role as members in this particular commission, and 5 MPs were also there of Jammu and Kashmir to serve under the commission as associate members. Okay, the first draft of recommendation, which came back a long time ago, draft recommendation was suggesting an increase of 6 assembly seats for Jammu, 1 for Kashmir, and on February 6, it submitted its second draft report. So a lot of drafting was done before any final decision was reached at. And delimitation, if we talk about the delimitation commission, there is a controversy on many sub things, like delimitation for the rest of the country has been frozen until the year 2026, but it was nullified in case of Jammu and Kashmir. Also, the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Act is already under consideration by the Judiciary of India. That also makes it a point of contention that delimitation cannot take place under this particular act. Okay, and other factors that are taken into consideration apart from population, because population plays a big factor when we talk about delimitation exercises for Jammu and Kashmir, it has other factors as well, such as size, remoteness. It is very remote and very close to the border of a nuisance creating neighbor. So this is the biggest problem, that is the bone of contention that the state parties of Jammu and Kashmir and the center have. Okay, so what is the outcome basically right now? The outcome is that the commission has increased 7 assembly seats. Okay, 6 are in Jammu, now it brings it to 43 seats, and 1 for Kashmir, that is now 47. There have been massive changes in the structure of assembly seats as well. Okay, such as Lok Sabha. For Lok Sabha, there has been a redrawing of the boundaries of the Anantnag and Jammu seats. How? See, if we talk about this map, the Pir Panjal districts of Jammu and Kashmir Union Territory, Poonch and Rajouri, okay, these seats were actually in Jammu before the commission suggested any changes. Now it has been, the seats have been sent to Anantnag. Okay, Anantnag is in Kashmir, so there has been a change with respect to seats. That is also something that is very important to know about this particular outcome. Provision of at least 2 members for Kashmiri Pandits. We all saw Kashmir Files. It was a pretty controversial movie. Not many people agreed, some agreed. So you see that because of this particular issue, the Kashmiri Pandit issue was also raised by the commission. It has said that provision of at least 2 members from the community of Kashmiri migrants, the Kashmiri Pandits or Kashmiri Hindus in the legislative assemblies to take place. Also, the center should consider giving representation in the Jammu and Kashmir legislative assembly to the displaced person from Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So many people from Pakistan occupied Kashmir also migrated, and that is why provision for their representation has also been considered. I mean, the center should consider, that was raised by the commission. Reservation. The reservation issue has also been taken into consideration. 9 assembly seats have been reserved for scheduled tribes, which is a very good move. And also 6 of these are in the redrawn Anantnag parliamentary seat, including in Pooch and Rajouri. And these 2 districts have the highest number of ST population, which I showed you in the map. Okay. Now implications are going to be there with respect to demographic changes, reservation in parliament, and of course the vote bank eventually. 44% of the population will vote of Jammu will vote for 48% of the seat as a whole if I take Jammu and Kashmir as a union territory, and 56 living in Kashmir will vote in the remaining 52% of the seats. Okay. Also in the earlier setup, Kashmir's 56% had 55.4% of the seats, and Jammu's 43.8% had 44.5% of the seats. So the Kashmir, the valley of Kashmir is basically Muslim dominated areas, and for Jammu it's Hindu dominated areas. So there will be a reshuffling of vote with respect to vote bank. Now the seats have been redrawn, and of the 6 new seats in Jammu, 4 have predominantly Hindu population, and of the 2 new seats in Chenab region, which comprises of Doda and Kishtwar districts, Muslims are a minority in the Pader state. So this is not something to be remembered, but just to make sure that you understand the concept of it. When you have to write the answers, you understand the concept of it. In Kashmir, the 1 new seat is Kupwara. Okay, remember this, the stronghold for People's Conference that is seen close to the BJP. So of course, there is a reshuffling of the seats with respect to administrative changes, with respect to economic changes that are intended by the current government, and with respect to basically the political structure. Okay, but more so it is said by the center that it is much more administrative and of course economic. Okay, no clarity has been given as of yet with respect to reservation of seat for Kashmiri Pandits, because a suggestion kind of has been given. Okay, influence of various demographic groups, whatever demographic groups are there in Jammu and Kashmir, they will play a huge role now. Okay, and also if we see that opposition parties, they have anticipated that there will be a reservation for ST in parliament as well, and political parties in the valley, that means Kashmir, see it as reducing the influence of ethnic Kashmiri speaking Muslim voters. So this is a highly politicized issue. We do not have to go into the political overtones of the entire issue. We have to understand the concept of it. We have to understand it enough so that whenever you are going to go through the interview process of the UPSC, you at least have certain knowledge, then you can form an opinion. Don't be biased, okay? And parties in the valley expect Baramullah's restructuring. It will consolidate the Shia votes. Vote bank is something that is very close to the heart of Kashmir, okay? In conclusion, that we have to see here, the Delimitation Commission as a whole had a very rocky beginning, and it still has a rocky beginning. Rocky ending, I can say, and it will go through a lot of procedure before the implementation can finally be seen. Lot of politicization, lot of consideration, lot of consultations will also take place. The issue of Reorganization Act does seem to be holding water because it is sub judice, okay? It is still under the judiciary. The external nuisance that is being created by very aggressive territorial countries like Pakistan and China, of course, it is going to play a major role in the entire issue. The political tussle, of course, people are eventually going to be affected by it, but some parties have to understand that it is not all about political power, but also about the welfare of the people eventually. Then only it will be a happy valley. Statehood demand. Another thing is that right now, by the Reorganization Act, Ladakh and Jammu and Kashmir are the 2 union territories. Okay, so we have to keep in mind that now the Reorganization Act, if it gets nullified, and the statehood demand is also getting very stronger now. So if it goes back to statehood, again the delimitation exercise will take place. It's a very messy affair. So these are the certain things, okay? And also I asked you yesterday about one question with respect to the prelims alert, and before that as well, and I told you that I will bring the facts correctly, right? Just give me a moment so that I can tell you the names of those who have answered it correctly. First of all, before this, the in news that I gave you yesterday, before that I asked you which states are the largest producer, not reserves, largest producer of coal. So for fiscal year 2020-21, it was Chhattisgarh, okay, and after that it was followed by Odisha, and then Madhya Pradesh, and then Jharkhand. Okay, remember that. And many of you have answered it correctly. Just bear with me a moment so that I can announce the names of those who have answered it correctly. All right. So I think it was coal and power cut, right? So let's go through that. Coal and power cut. Yes, Sonia has answered it correctly. Yes, so Jharkhand has the largest coal reserve. That is true. But Chhattisgarh is the largest producer. That can of course be true. Why? Because you also need to have technology to produce the coal, right? Then we have inspiring classes official. Correct, Chhattisgarh is correct. Then we also have Mr. Kavish answering it correctly. Then many other people have answered it correctly. Anita Paraja has answered it correctly. Madhusudan has answered it correctly. Chhattisgarh is the first producer of coal. Then we also have Sabya Sachi Dash. And then let me just go through. Many of you have not answered it correctly. You might have gotten confused between largest producer and largest reserve. So don't let that happen. Charu Pathak has answered it correctly. Good, Charu. Then we also have Akash Deep, correct. I see many of you have gotten confused about the question. It's largest producer, not largest reserve. Okay. Harshita has answered it correctly. Shweta has answered it correctly. Then we have Misha answering it correctly. Divya Jyoti has answered it correctly. Okay. Nikhilesh has answered it correctly. And Ankita Reddy has answered it correctly. Some of you have gotten confused, I guess. That is why you have not answered it correctly. And before that, I also is Hindi our national language. That was also having one prelims alert, right? So yes, we see that many of you have answered the question correctly with respect to most spoken language, right? Yes, Harshita has answered it correctly. Okay, and Dinesh Pradhan again. Then also, I guess Kashish has answered it correctly. It was with respect to one commission. It was related to official language. Medha has answered it correctly. Many of you have answered it correctly. So these kind of interactions I'm looking forward, so that we can also make it, the bridge is getting a little closer with respect to the making the classes interactive, not just me speaking along. Okay, so answer this question correctly. Try to practice this question. What is the Delimitation Commission? With respect to the delimitation process in Jammu and Kashmir, shed a light on the power the commission wields. Okay, write it in 250 words. Also, you know, these kind of questions which I ask you, that which state has produced the largest producer of something, these can be found on Instagram as well. We all have Instagram, our Instagram account. Try to follow the pages if you are preparing for UPSC and state pieces. The governmental Instagram accounts for Ministry of Electronics, Information Technology, Home Affairs, Culture, very good pages. Do follow them. Okay, so that's it for today. Tomorrow we can meet again with another segment. Until then, stay updated and thank you so much for watching.